Welcome back to the lesson. In our previous video, we've successfully created our add subject combination view, and we also went ahead to add this interactive select input field, and I hope everything is clear to you. And in this video, we're going to be assigning the subject, our specific subject that we're going to be selecting from this our input fields to a specific class. All right, now let's get back to our source code. Okay, now our first job is to go ahead and create our route, as we have everything ready in our form. So let's go ahead and create the route that will carry our request input to our database. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and call our route stow subject combination, like so. And of course our route method should be post. All right, now let's go ahead and create our route inside of our web.php file. Okay, inside of our web.php file here, let me go ahead and copy this route. Copy this, paste it down below here, and then let's go ahead and copy our route name, stow subject combination. Let's copy this, get back to our route, and then update our new route name, stow subject combination. All right, now let's update our URL as well. Copy this, let's say stow subject combination. Okay, and of course our route method should be post, because our method right here in our form is post, so of course our route should be post. All right, now we're going to go ahead and change our method name as well to stow subject combination, something like that. All right, now after this, we're going to go ahead and copy our method name. Let's navigate to our subject controller. Okay, inside of our subject controller, let's come down below here and say public function. Paste our method name, stow subject combination, and of course we're going to go ahead and pass our request like so. And then let's go ahead and say end method. Okay, now let's go ahead and confirm our request inputs as usual using the the die-dump method. Let's go ahead and say $request all. And now let's go ahead and save our files. Let's go ahead and say save all. Okay, let's run our optimize command, php artisan optimize. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look in our application. Let's refresh our application. Okay, now let's go ahead and select a class. Let's say class 1, add a subject. Let me actually go ahead and add a couple of subjects. So let's go ahead and say create subject. Let's say we have chemistry, code should be 435. Let's say create subject. Okay, now basically we have 3 subjects, so let's go back to our add subject combination. Let's select our class, English, add more. We have mathematics, add more, and let's say chemistry. Okay, now let's go ahead and hit on assign. Okay, we're getting our subject ID. As you can see, we are getting our subject ID of 1, 2, 3, meaning this is our subject right here. Let's go ahead and refresh this. As we have English with the ID 1, 2 for mathematics, and 4 for chemistry. So these are basically our subject ID that we're getting, but we are not getting our class ID. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look. Why are we not getting our class ID? Let's go back here to our add subject combination. Okay, our class ID. All right, here our select input field does not have a name, so that's why we're not getting our class ID, but we already pass it here, as you can see. So let's go ahead and give it a name. Let's say name should be class underscore ID. So let's go ahead and save our file, save all. Now let's get back to our application. Let's go back, refresh. Okay, now let's go ahead and select our class. Let's say class 1, English, add more, mathematics, add more, and let's go ahead and say chemistry and say assign. Yes, as you can see now we are having our class ID, which is 1, and also our subject ID. So friend, as I've told you earlier, that our subject ID are going to be stored as an array because we are selecting multiple subject. And here, remember, inside of our form here we specify our select name as subject ID, and then we use the square bracket next to it, which basically allows us to save multiple IDs inside of our subject IDs variable right here. So that's basically the reason why we're getting our IDs here in form of arrays. So now that we have our class and also our subject IDs, how do we go about assigning this specific subject to this specific class? Well, we can simply do that by establishing a relationship between our classes table and also our subject table. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and establish a many-to-many relationship, because in this case, classes can have multiple subject, and also subject can also be assigned to multiple classes. So let's go ahead and define a many-to-many relationship between these two tables, our classes table and also our subject table. But before that, to establish a many-to-many relationship, we need to have an intermediary table called the pivot table. There's going to be the link to establish the relationship between our classes and also our subject. So let's first of all go ahead and create our pivot table. We can simply create a pivot table using the artisan make migration command. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's come over here and then let's type in the following command. Let's say php artisan make migration create classes subject table, like so. So let's go ahead and hit enter. Okay, now we've successfully created our pivot table called classes subject table. Alright, now let's go ahead and take a look inside of our source code. Now let's navigate to our migration directory. Okay, inside of our migration directory here, as you can see, we have our classes subject table. Okay, now inside of our classes subject table, let's go ahead and say table big integer like so, and then we're going to specify the name as classes ID. And then let's go ahead and create for our subject ID. Okay, let's go ahead and say subject ID. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and add another extra column. Let's go ahead and say integer. Okay, and let's go ahead and call it status. This will basically hold the status of our subject combinations. So let's go ahead and give it a default value. Say default. Let's go ahead and give it a 1. So this our default function is going to assign the value 1 to our status column by default. So let's go ahead and say semicolon right here. Alright friends, that's basically all you have to do. By default, our pivot table only holds the foreign IDs of our two tables that we're going to be connecting, which in our case here, we're trying to establish a relationship between our classes table and also our subject table. So our pivot table holds the foreign ID of our class and also the foreign ID of our subject. But we also went ahead to add another extra column inside of our pivot table called status. So now let's go ahead and save our file. Save. Okay, now let's go ahead and run our migration to actually create our classes subject table inside of our database right here. You know, our pivot table, our classes subject table right here is not going to appear inside the list of our database table until we migrate it. So let's go ahead and migrate that. Let's go ahead and say php artisan migrate, hit enter. Okay, now our pivot table is migrated successfully. So let's go back here and take a look. Let's refresh. Okay, now as you can see, we have our classes subject table, which is our pivot table, and inside we have the classes ID column, we have the subject ID, and we also have our status column. So now after successfully creating our pivot table, our next step is to go ahead and establish the relationship inside of our classes and subject model. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and close this our migration because we're not going to be needing that. Let's find our classes and subject model, because that's exactly where we establish our relationship, which is right here. So let's go ahead and establish the relationship. So let's go ahead and say public function, And here inside of our classes model, our relationship is going to be with subjects, okay, like so, and then call our relationship type, which is going to be belongs to many, okay, because we're establishing a many-to-many relationship. And of course, do make sure that your relationship is loaded, like so. It says use inside Illuminate, database, Eloquent, and inside relations we have belongs to many, okay. And now let's go ahead and open our declaration box. Now let's go ahead and say return. This belongs to many, like so. And our first parameter is going to be our class, our subject class, subject class, okay. And our second parameter is going to be our pivot table, which is right here. Let me go ahead and copy the name, classes subject. Let's go ahead and copy that. Now let's get back to our code, paste that here, classes subject. And then our third parameter is going to be our classes foreign ID, like so. Let's go ahead and close this window. And then our fourth is going to be our subject foreign ID, subject ID, like so. And then after that, here we're going to say with pivot, like so. Say status, okay. Let's go ahead and say view word wrap. Okay, now let's come over here and say semicolon. We need to add this with pivot method because we added extra column inside of our pivot table. By default, as I mentioned earlier, our pivot table only stores the foreign IDs of our two tables that we are establishing relationship for. But since we added extra column inside of our pivot table, which is our status column, we of course need to indicate it right here with this with pivot method. So that's basically all you have to do. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our subject model. We're going to go ahead and establish the same relationship. So let's go ahead and find our subject model, which is right here. Okay, now let's go ahead and paste this down below here. Okay, let's go ahead and say word wrap to get rid of overflow. Okay, now let's go ahead and import this belongs to many class. Okay, we need to go ahead and make some minor adjustments. Now that we are inside the subject model, our third parameter should be our subject ID should come first before our class's ID. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and cut this. Okay, something like this. Then after our classes, our second parameter, let's go ahead and paste this and say comma, like so. Okay, that's all you have to do. Now we can go ahead and start assigning our subject to our classes inside of our subject controller. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now inside of here, we're not going to be needing this anymore. So our first job here is to go ahead and get both our subject and classes that we are passing inside of our request here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get them. First of all, let's go ahead and say class. And let's go ahead and reference our classes model and say find. We're going to go ahead and find our specific class with our request class ID that we pass in here, which is right here, class ID. Let's go ahead and copy that, paste this right here. Okay, now we get our class from our database with its unique ID that we are getting from our request, which is 1. Alright, so now let's go ahead and grab our subject. Let's say $ subjects, which is going to be equals to our request subject, which is right here. Copy this. Alright, paste it right here. Now we have all of our subject IDs saved inside of our subject variable here, and we also have our class, our specific class, saved inside this our class variable. So now we're going to go ahead and start assigning our subject here to our specific class. This our subject that we are getting, and assign it to our specific selected class. So let's go ahead and do that. Now let's get back to our code, and now let's come down here and assign our subject to our classes. So let's go ahead and say class, like so, and then call our relationship, our database relationship, which is going to be subject, like so. Let's come back here, class subjects, Let's go ahead and say attach our subjects. Copy this, paste this right here. Alright, that's basically all we have to do. Now this attach method is going to assign all our subject that we are fetching from our request to our specific class. Alright, so let's go ahead and set after assigning our subject, we wanted to have a toaster message. Okay, let's go ahead and copy this. Copy. And let's come down here and then paste our toaster message. Okay, now our toaster message should say combination done successfully. Okay, combination done successfully. And let's go ahead and redirect ourselves back to the same page, not to our manage subject view. So let's go ahead and say back like so with this specific toaster message. Okay, now if everything is good, let's go ahead and save our file. Just save all. Okay, here we have our relationship established. Our classes belongs to many subjects, and also our subject should belongs to many classes. Oh, I forgot to change the method name here. Here should be classes. Okay, like so. Our subject should belongs to many classes. Okay, here should also be classes. Okay, the classes model. Classes like so. Okay. Okay, everything is good. Here we grab our class and also grab our subject, and we use the attach method to assign our subject to our specific class. Okay, and then we have our toaster message. Alright, now let's go ahead and save our file. Save all. And now let's run our PHP artisan optimize command. Optimize. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look. Now let's get back to our application, refresh our application. Okay, now let's go ahead and try to assign to class 1 some subjects. So let's go ahead and say English, ADMO, Mathematics, ADMO. Okay, let's go ahead and say Chemistry, and let's go ahead and hit on Assign button. Yes, as you can see, we are having our combination done successfully. So let's go ahead and take a look inside of our database. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh this. Yes, as you can see, we have our classes ID, which is our class 1. Class 1 has an ID of 1. Let me go ahead and show you that. Let's come over here to our classes. Okay, if you come over here, our classes, our class 1 has an ID of 1, which is this right here. Our class ID is 111 throughout, and then our subject ID, we have subject with an ID 1, with ID 2, and also subject with ID 3. So let's go ahead and take a look inside of our subjects table. Okay, as you can see, we have subject ID 1, it's English, Mathematics has an ID of 2, and Chemistry has an ID of 4. And if you go back to our pirate table, you're going to see ID 1, English, Mathematics, and Chemistry. So very cool, that's very cool. We've now successfully assigned our subject to our classes using our attach method. So friend, that's it. That's all we have to do to assign our subject to our classes. Okay, and here we have our message that says combination done successfully. Cool, that's very cool. So that's it for this video. I hope everything is clear to you, and in our next video we're going to be creating our manage subject combination view. So hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.